Imagine standing on the bank of a small river, now situated within the Ukrainian steppes, in the autumn of 1362. Before you stretches a Mongol army, descendants of the warriors who once terrified all of Europe. Behind you are the Lithuanian detachments, a people many Europeans still considered wild heathens. In a few short hours, a battle will unfold, its outcome fundamentally reshaping the power dynamics in Eastern Europe for the next 600 years. This isn't Kulikovo Field, the famous battle revered by Rus, nor is it Grunwald, where the Teutonic Order suffered defeat. This is the Battle of Blue Waters, a conflict almost lost to history, yet possibly more significant than both combined. The question arises, why has such a pivotal battle virtually vanished from historical texts, and what truly transpired on the Sinyuka River's banks that autumn? But before we delve into the answers, please let me know where you're watching this video from and what time it is for you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious to know which time zones across the globe you're joining from. To grasp the immense importance of the Battle of Blue Waters, we need to rewind history approximately 100 years. In 1240, when Batu Khan's Mongol forces swept through Eastern Europe like a hurricane, they didn't merely conquer territories, they established an entire imperial system. The Golden Horde, or Ulug Ulus, the Great State, as the Mongols called it, was more than just a military might. It was a sophisticated administrative machine. From their capital, Sarai, on the Volga River, the Khans governed vast lands stretching from Siberia to the borders of Hungary. How did their system operate? It was simple, yet effective. Rus princes, who would become the future rulers of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, were required to journey to Sarai to obtain a yarlik, a form of patent granting them the right to rule. They paid an annual tribute and supplied warriors on demand. Should anyone defy them, Mongol forces would appear to remind them of their authority with fire and sword. Yet, what's remarkable is that the Mongols didn't govern directly. They allowed local princes to rule their people, adhere to their laws, and even maintain their religion. The Golden Horde's interests lay solely in two things: money and power. This was pragmatic imperialism, honed to an astonishing degree. For a century, this system functioned exceptionally well. Under Khan Uzbek, from 1312 to 1340, the Golden Horde reached its zenith. Trade routes from the Black Sea to the Chinese Yuan dynasty flourished. Cities like Sarai evolved into centers of culture and commerce. While the Mongols embraced Islam, they remained tolerant of Christianity and other faiths. However, any empire built upon a strong individual leader possesses inherent vulnerabilities. When powerful leaders pass away, things often begin to unravel. In 1359, Khan Berdebeg was assassinated by Kulpa, one of many rivals coveting power, and the gates of chaos swung open. This was followed by a period historians name the Great Troubles, one of the most tumultuous eras in medieval history. Over 2 decades, more than 25 different Khans vied for the title of legitimate ruler of the Golden Horde. What was the average lifespan of a Khan during this time? Somewhere between a few months and 2 years. This was not merely a power struggle, it represented a systemic collapse of the governing structure. The Golden Horde began to fragment into separate uluses, each with its own warlord, each pledging allegiance to different Khans. By 1362, the year of the Battle of Blue Waters, the Golden Horde had effectively splintered into 3 factions. Kelebek ruled from Sarai, Bulat Timur controlled Volga Bulgaria, and Abdullah held Crimea. Meanwhile, Mamai, a formidable warlord who couldn't claim the throne himself, as he wasn't a descendant of Genghis Khan, governed through puppet Khans from his Crimean residence. Consider this predicament. Rus princes no longer knew where to go for their yarliks, or to whom they should pay tribute, Sarai or Crimea. And if they chose incorrectly, another Mongol army might appear to punish them. Some historians propose that the Black Death, the plague that devastated Europe and Asia in the 1340s and 1350s, severely weakened the Golden Horde's economy. Trade routes were disrupted, populations plummeted, and income from taxes and tribute saw a drastic decline. But perhaps more impactful was the psychological breakdown. For a century, the Rus principalities had believed the Golden Horde to be invincible. Yet now, observing the Mongols killing one another for power, without clear leadership, a question began to form in their minds. If they couldn't govern themselves, how could they govern us? It was at this crucial juncture that Algirdas, the Grand Duke of Lithuania, recognized an unparalleled opportunity. Algirdas was not your typical medieval ruler. Born around 1296, he was one of 7 sons of Grand Duke Gediminas, a man who laid the foundations for what would become one of Europe's largest states in the 15th century. But what distinguished Algirdas wasn't solely his family legacy. It was his strategic foresight. When his father passed away in 1341, Algirdas, alongside his brother Kęstutis, did something quite remarkable for that era. They shared power. Kęstutis took charge of the western borders, which were constantly under assault from Teutonic knights. Meanwhile, Algirdas concentrated his efforts on the east, where prospering Russian principalities were experiencing the weakening influence of the Golden Horde. This power-sharing agreement is regarded as one of the most effective in medieval history, notable for its lack of rivalry and conspiracies, as well as a clear division of responsibilities and mutual trust. Such an approach allowed Algirdas to fully dedicate himself to his aspirations. What exactly were these ambitions? He didn't just aim for territorial expansion. Algirdas possessed a more profound understanding. He wanted to establish a multinational, multi-religious state where pagan Lithuanians could coexist peacefully with Orthodox Rus, and where authority would be based not on oppression, but on shared interests. This might seem idealistic, but Algirdas's actual policies confirm his intent. He married Orthodox princesses twice. In conquered territories, he appointed Russian princes as governors, allowing them to rule according to their own laws and customs. In Vilnius, the pagan capital of Lithuania, he erected Orthodox churches. He even made Ruthenian, or Old Belarusian, a precursor to modern Ukrainian and Belarusian languages, one of the Grand Duchy's official languages. This was not outdated imperialism, but something qualitatively different. Around 1360, Algirdas initiated his boldest plan, a direct assault on the Golden Horde's domain. First, in the period around 1357 to 1358, he captured Chernihiv and Bryansk, northern Russian lands that were still paying tribute to the Horde. He then pushed even further east, seizing the Korsun fortress on the Don River, right in the heart of Tatar territories. These moves served as reconnaissance. Algirdas was testing the Golden Horde's reaction. And what was that reaction? Almost none. The Khans were too preoccupied with internal strife. Around 1360, Algirdas made a symbolic move. He deposed Fyodor, the last Kievan prince acknowledged by the Golden Horde, and appointed his own son, Vladimir. Kiev, the mother of Russian cities, the cradle of Slavic civilization, devastated by the Mongols in 1240, now seemed under Lithuanian rule. However, a problem arose. Formally, Kiev was still a vassal of the Golden Horde and was obligated to pay tribute. Algirdas's unauthorized appointment of his son was a direct insult. The Golden Horde, despite its internal chaos, could not let this pass. The 3 BKAs, rulers of Podolia, the southwestern region bordering Kiev, gathered their forces. They represented the interests of Abdullah, one of the Khans vying for power. Thus, the stage was set for the Battle of Blue Waters. In the autumn of 1362 or 1363, sources differ on the exact date, Algirdas led his army across the Dnieper River, heading southwest towards Podolia. This was not a raid, but a meticulously planned campaign. Algirdas brought not only Lithuanian warriors, but also Ruthenian detachments from his conquered territories of Smolensk, Bryansk, and Kiev. He demonstrated that this was not a foreign invasion, but a liberation, which made his army particularly unique at the time. They were not heavy European knights. Lithuanian nobility during this period lacked the wealth to afford expensive, heavy armor and war horses. Their primary strength was light cavalry, mobile, agile, and trained to fight both mounted and dismounted. But they learned quickly. After almost a century of confronting Teutonic knights, the Lithuanians developed sophisticated tactics. They knew how to utilize terrain, how to feign retreat to lure enemies into traps, and how to effectively combine cavalry with infantry. More importantly, they had something the Mongols lacked in 1362: unity under a single command. The two armies met near Torovitsia, a small town on the Sinyuka River. The Mongols called it Yabo, the governor's town. The Rus called it Blue Waters. Why this name, no one knows for certain. Perhaps because of the color of the river water or some vanished geographical feature. But this name became entrenched in history. We have only one detailed account of the battle from Maciej Stryjkowski, a Polish-Lithuanian chronicler writing in 1582, more than 2 centuries after the event. Therefore, we should be cautious. However, his description aligns with what we know about the tactics of both sides. According to Stryjkowski, Algirdas arrayed his army in 6 groups, forming a crescent. This was an unusual formation for medieval Europe, where knights typically lined up for a frontal assault. Why a crescent? Because Algirdas was anticipating a classic Mongol tactic: mounted archery. As was anticipated, when the confrontation commenced, the Tatar cavalry initiated an assault on the flanks of the Lithuanian formation, unleashing a continuous volley of arrows. This marked a continuation of the strategy that had instilled fear in European armies for over a century: maintaining distance, moving swiftly, firing accurately, and avoiding close-quarters combat unless possessing an overwhelming advantage. However, in this particular engagement, circumstances diverged significantly. The arrows had negligible impact. Chroniclers like Stryjkowski recount this occurrence, pondering its cause. Perhaps Algirdas had learned from previous battles. Alternatively, his soldiers might have employed larger shields or enhanced protective gear. It's plausible that the range the Tatar cavalry was compelled to uphold due to their crescent formation diminished the accuracy and penetrative force of their arrows. Or, most likely, the quality of Tatar cavalry in 1362 had substantially declined compared to the eras of Genghis Khan or Batu Khan. Seasoned warriors had either aged or perished in internal conflicts, and new recruits were likely inadequately trained. It is probable that both horses and equipment were below standard due to financial constraints. Whatever the reason, the outcome was evident. The archery attacks failed to yield the desired effect. It was at this juncture that Algirdas made a decisive move. Instead of waiting and allowing the Tatars to persist with their assaults, he issued the command to advance. The Lithuanians and Ruthenians, armed with spears and swords, surged forward. This was not a reckless charge, but a purposeful and organized progression, with the formation meticulously maintained at each step. The Tatar cavalry, accustomed to adversaries who either held their ground or attempted to pursue them only to fall into traps, encountered an entirely novel situation: a force relentlessly closing in, compelling them to choose between direct engagement and retreat. This is when Kęstutis' sons, Algirdas's cousins, alongside contingents from Nerdikos, launched an attack on the Tatar flanks with crossbows. This was the turning point. The crossbow, a weapon developed in Europe specifically to counter Mongol cavalry, boasted greater range and piercing power than traditional bows. Furthermore, effective crossbow operation didn't demand years of training. Attacked from the front by infantry and cavalry, and subjected to a barrage from 2 sides by crossbows, the Tatar ranks began to disintegrate. They couldn't maintain a safe distance. They were unable to employ their customary mobile tactics. Crucially, they lacked support. In a typical engagement with a unified Golden Horde, reinforcements would have arrived, a reserve army mobilized, and coordinated actions with other uluses would have occurred. But in 1362, none of this transpired. The 3 bays of Podolia fought in isolation. The Tatar formation crumbled. According to Stryjkowski, they commenced a disorganized retreat, the worst military scenario for an army. Loss of order, loss of command, every man for himself. Algirdas secured a decisive victory. Following the battle, Algirdas pressed on, marching directly into Podolia. Chronicles state he liberated, as Lithuanian sources phrase it, the lands south of Kyiv, the steppes beyond Ochakov on the Black Sea coast, from Putivl to Ust-Don. What did this imply? Essentially, Algirdas seized a significant portion of central and southern Ukraine, the most fertile and vital territories the Golden Horde controlled in the west. But what was even more intriguing was his administration of these regions. Algirdas did not install Lithuanian governors everywhere. Instead, he granted Podolia to Kęstutis' sons, who had fought bravely in the battle. Many local Ruthenian princes were retained in their positions, merely required to shift their allegiance from the Horde to Lithuania. Most importantly, he declared, "Payments of tribute to the Tatars are hereby ceased." Imagine that. For over a century, every autumn, carts laden with silver, furs, honey, and slaves departed from Ruthenian principalities for Sarai. This was a symbol of subjugation. It was the price of existence. Now, Algirdas proclaimed, "No more." The Golden Horde's reaction was practically non-existent. They were too engrossed in internecine warfare. Abdullah Khan, to whom the three Podolian beys answered, was battling Murad in Sarai. Mamai was attempting to consolidate his power in Crimea. No one possessed the resources or the focus to retaliate against Lithuania. This highlights Algirdas's greatest strategic lesson: impeccable timing. He did not attack the Golden Horde when it was strong under Uzbek. He waited until they were weakened, then struck swiftly and definitively. However, the true consequence of the Battle of Blue Waters was not merely territorial acquisition, but also its profound psychological impact. The Battle of Blue Waters marked a turning point in Eastern European history in three primary aspects. First, it shattered the myth of Mongol invincibility. For over a century, Europeans believed the Mongols were unbeatable in a major open battle. Prior successes, such as at Liegnitz in 1241, were merely tactical setbacks. Mongols retreated due to political rather than military considerations. However, the contest at Siniavodi was a different matter entirely. This was a direct military engagement on ground of their own choosing, and they were completely defeated. News of this decisive victory reverberated across Eastern Europe. Princes in Moscow and Ryazan began to ponder whether, if Lithuania could accomplish such a feat, they couldn't as well. Dmitry Donskoy of Moscow, who would later vanquish Mamai at the Battle of Kulikovo in 1380, was likely directly inspired by Algirdas's triumph 18 years earlier. Secondly, this battle fundamentally altered the geopolitical power balance in Eastern Europe. Prior to the confrontation at Siniavodi, Lithuania, while significant, was largely considered a secondary state, a pagan kingdom caught between the Teutonic Knights to the west and the Golden Horde to the east, struggling for survival. Following this pivotal engagement, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania ascended to become one of the continent's preeminent powers. Its dominion stretched from the Baltic Sea almost to the Black Sea, bordering Poland and, remarkably, reaching within 50 miles of Moscow. This development created a formidable counterbalance to the burgeoning Muscovite principality. Over the subsequent 2 centuries, the rivalry between Lithuania and Moscow for dominion over the Rus lands shaped the region's historical trajectory. Although Moscow ultimately prevailed, forming the foundation of Russia, Lithuania's existence as an influential power significantly retarded this process for centuries. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, the battle paved the way for an entirely new form of statehood. The Grand Duchy of Lithuania, under Algirdas and his successors, wasn't merely a national entity. It was a multi-ethnic, multilingual, and multi-confessional state. Pagan Lithuanians, Orthodox Rusins, Catholic Poles, and Muslim Tatars coexisted within its borders. When Lithuania united with Poland in 1569 to form the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, this model expanded and endured for nearly 2 centuries. This Commonwealth emerged as one of Europe's most tolerant political structures, fostering ideas of noble rights, religious freedom, and even early forms of constitutionalism. While certainly imperfect, it offered an alternative path to the absolutism and intolerance prevalent in many other parts of Europe. All of this began, at least in part, with Algirdas's decision not simply to conquer, but to integrate the territories reclaimed from the Golden Horde. Yet, despite its profound significance, the Battle of Siniavodi has largely faded from historical memory. Few contemporary documents describe it. Russian and Ruthenian chronicles mention it only briefly. Mongol sources are almost entirely silent. The most detailed account comes from the Tale of Podillia, a narrative included in Lithuanian chronicles written approximately 70 years after the event, during a period when Lithuania was contending with Poland for control of Podillia. Some historians have even questioned whether the battle truly occurred as depicted, speculating if it was merely a series of minor skirmishes later exaggerated into a major conflict by chroniclers. However, most modern scholars agree that something momentous transpired in the autumn of 1362 or 1363 near the Sinyuka River. The evidence lies not in exhaustive texts, but in its profound repercussions. The abrupt shift in sovereignty over a vast territory, the cessation of tribute payments, and the construction of Lithuanian castles and fortifications in Podillia. Why then was it forgotten? The reasons are political. After Lithuania's union with Poland in 1569, the Polish government had every reason to diminish Lithuanian military achievements to justify Polish dominance in the Union. Subsequently, when the Russian Empire conquered Poland and Lithuania in the late 18th century, Russian historians were incentivized to emphasize Kulikovo, a Russian victory, and overlook Sinyavodi, a Lithuanian triumph. During the Soviet era, the historical narrative became even more complex. Lithuania was part of the USSR, but highlighting Lithuanian historical achievements could potentially fuel nationalism. Consequently, Sinyavodi continued to be marginalized. Only after Lithuania regained independence in 1990 did historians begin to seriously investigate this battle. Conferences were held in Ukraine in 1997, 1998, and 2012. In 2022, the National Bank of Belarus issued a commemorative coin depicting Grand Duke Algirdas. History is being rewritten, or rather, recovered. So, what insights can we glean from a battle that occurred over 660 years ago? Lesson 1. Timing is everything. Algirdas did not attack the Golden Horde at its zenith. He waited, observed, and prepared. When the opportunity arose, when his adversary was at its weakest, he acted decisively. In life, career, or any endeavor, knowing when to act is just as crucial as knowing how to act. Lesson 2. Unity triumphs over division. In 1362, the Golden Horde commanded more warriors and resources than Lithuania, possessing a longer military tradition. Yet, they were disunited. Instead of fighting their common adversary, they largely turned against each other. Although numerically smaller, Lithuania was unified under strong leadership, and this cohesion proved to be a decisive advantage. The third lesson is that nothing is insurmountable. For over a century, the Golden Horde had appeared to be an indestructible force. Yet every empire, every system, and every power structure eventually develops vulnerabilities. A leader's task is to identify these weaknesses, and the challenge lies in exploiting them. The fourth lesson is that victory encompasses more than just territorial gains. It involves a vision. Algirdas didn't merely reclaim lands from the Golden Horde. He forged an alternative model for a multi-ethnic state. This model was founded on principles of tolerance, local autonomy, and cooperation rather than oppression. While not flawless and ultimately destined to fail, for over 3 centuries it offered alternative approaches to governing. Finally, history is not predetermined. Had the 3 noble families from Podolia's lands triumphed at the Battle of Blue Waters in 1362, the entire trajectory of Eastern European history could have unfolded very differently. Lithuania might never have evolved into a formidable power. Moscow might have unified Russian territories a century earlier, and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth model might not have emerged at all. A single battle, a day of decisions made by a few individuals, reshaped an entire continent. This illustrates both the power and the burden of human choice. On that autumn day in 1362, near a small river in Ukraine, 2 armies clashed. One embodied an empire that had once terrorized the world, while the other carried hope. Hope that the small could still challenge the mighty, that unity could overcome disunity, and that history was still being written. By sunset, the Golden Horde, a formidable stronghold stretching from China to Hungary, had lost a significant portion of its power and influence. It never fully recovered. Within 2 decades, it faced further fragmentation, and within a century, it ceased to exist entirely. Lithuania, a fledgling pagan principality that had previously struggled for survival, ascended to become one of Europe's largest powers. The multi-ethnic state model it created, built on cooperation rather than conquest, shaped regional history for centuries. All of this unfolded thanks to Algirdas, a man who dared to act when others merely observed. He possessed a vision not just for conquest, but for the creation of something superior, understanding that the right timing, strategy, and purpose could transform the world. This is the enduring lesson of the Battle of Blue Waters. Not that violence solves problems, it does not, but that during pivotal historical moments, individual choices hold immense weight. That nothing is fixed, that tomorrow doesn't have to be a carbon copy of yesterday, and that sometimes, on the banks of an obscure river, history takes an unexpected turn. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss other stories from the forgotten past that reshaped our world. And don't forget to leave a comment about which historical event you believe is unfairly overlooked. In our next video, we'll delve into what happened next, how Algirdas and Lithuania continued to expand, confronted Moscow, and ultimately forged a crucial alliance with Poland. This narrative of diplomacy, betrayal, and power is as compelling as any cinematic epic. Thank you for watching.